What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today is episode 21 of the Let's Talk Dynasty podcast. We are going to be going through our fantasy football team previews for the 2023 fantasy football season. So hopefully you guys are all excited for that. If you missed our last episode, we talked about the AFC North and the NFC North. So we've dropped all of those teams as small videos. If you only want to watch a couple of those, on our channel, but we also have the big video that is going to be available for you too in our Let's Talk Dynasty playlist. So make sure you guys check that out. We're going to be talking about AFC and NFC South today, but let's not waste any more time. Let's bring the co-host MFGDs into the show here, and let's talk some Dynasty fantasy football, man. War, how you doing?
Hey, man, I'm good hanging in there. We're going to talk about some cool NFC and AFC South action. Oh, yeah, baby.
Let's get it. All right, man. So we've had some preseason football, and full disclosure, our show is not live this week, as most people can tell. It is pre-recorded. So we had just finished this weekend of preseason football. Now, I want to hear your takeaways, because something that is triggering me is that media is going nuclear about Justin Fields' day here in preseason. So from the Bears fan himself, let me know how you feel about the Justin Fields hype on Twitter.
I think it's a little bit ridiculous. Okay. So I'm going to try to just quickly break down this like I did to you through text last night. I understand to a degree why people are going crazy about the Justin Fields hype. He only threw 3 short passes, and 2 of them went yard, and it's kind of like, okay, what do you want DJ Moore and Khalil Herbert to do? Run out of bounds? I mean, but I think the media is going crazy, but they're doing it incorrectly. I think they should be going crazy about the idea that Justin Fields actually has an offensive line and some playmakers that can actually catch a short pass and take it 50, 60 yards. I think that's what they should be going crazy about, but they're almost framing it as if Justin Fields basically went out for 3 series, threw a pass in each series, and 2 of the 3 passes went for long touchdowns. And I mean, that's just not what happened. One of the main things from last year for Justin Fields was the fact that he didn't have, and the Bears were dead last in yards after the catch last season. So him having 2 guys that actually had huge yards after the catch plays, that is huge. But Justin, really, only thing I can give Justin for yesterday's game is escaping the pocket, and instead of him running himself for the yards or misreading, the field, he actually made the smart move to dump it off to Khalil Herbert and get the yardage. And those are the type of plays that we needed to see more of from Justin Fields last season. As opposed, his short game was pretty weak last season. So, yeah, to answer your question, the media is doing a little bit too much. No, it's not time to say Justin Fields the MVP. No, it's not time to say, I thought you said Justin Fields can't throw. Like, it's not the time for that either. I know Justin Fields can throw, but those 2 plays did not demonstrate examples of excellent execution as far as the passing game is concerned. So, no, sir. Media, please calm down. Let us sneak up on people. Thank you.
Yeah, man. I don't want to be like real life fantasy receipts, because that account is a little bit frustrating at times. But JPA football on Twitter is talking about Justin Fields had 2 50-plus yard touchdown passes today, and last year he had 3, so it's already on track to be better. Ian Hartit's on there talking about Justin Fields can't pass. I thought Justin Fields couldn't pass. And then Barstool Sports talking about MVP season loading for Justin Fields. So
the first guy at the very least, he could have tinkered with his tweet a little bit and it would have made it all right. He could have put 2 plays went for 50 and 60 yards last season. for the Chicago Bears. The Bears had 2 of them in one game, without mentioning Justin Fields through
Yeah,
those passes.
he framed it as in Justin Fields threw two
Yeah,
50-plus
no,
yard touchdowns
no.
today, which is true,
Justin
but it's not.
Justin will be the first one to tell everybody, like, no, I didn't really. He said it. He said it
Yeah,
in the post game. He said, "Yeah, I didn't really do anything. I made a couple passes that my guys made plays."
yeah.
So it ain't Justin that said it.
Well, it is what it is. You know, my Minnesota Vikings, I figure we'll just touch on both of our teams because it wouldn't be Let's Talk Dynasty if we don't talk our teams. But Jordan Addison looked the part, man. Jordan Addison made a hell of a sideline catch, 2 feet down, leaning out of bounds. They said it wasn't a catch on in live action, but then if you look at the replays, he had both feet down. But he looks the part. Excited to kind of see how he complements Justin Jefferson this year. But I figure we
Dude, I
should
would
just
say, real quick, I would say, surprisingly, so far, every receiver that you have hyped has looked the part. JSN has looked the part. Addison has looked the part. Zay Flowers had one play, and I didn't get to see it myself, but I always read about it. They said if you watch the game, just the way that he looked doing it, like you could tell that he's a dude. He's a dude. Plus, I heard that all training camp, Zay Flowers, and might as well say this now since our last video was the AFC North. So you go back. Zay Flowers, and I wish I said this in the last video. They said that all training camp, the defensive backs for the Baltimore Ravens, the only way they've been able to stop him is by holding him and basically doing things that would draw a flag in the actual game. So, and then QJ actually was looking decent too. So, I mean, yeah, the top guys are looking pretty good.
And we had a little bit of an A.T. Perry action today, who I'd been on record talking about, but he had what was it, 70 receiving yards and a touchdown today for the Saints. So I don't know what that'll be. Maybe he ends up being the backup to Michael Thomas as that X wide receiver. But if he does, then if there's ever an injury to Michael Thomas, which has seemed to be pretty
Yeah,
often,
yeah, it's just
A.T. Perry could
expected every
be.
year like Christmas, baby.
Yeah, A.T. Perry could be the X wide receiver behind him. So it'll be interesting to see. But we are going to be talking Saints later. So let's just hop right into this. We did come to talk about the AFC and the NFC South. So just like last show, we will start in the AFC. And we will go from the lowest win total projection all the way to the projected winner of the divisions. And so because of that, we are going to be starting our show today here with the Houston Texans. And right now, they're projected 6.5 wins. They are coming off of a season last year where they went 3-13-1. New head coach in the building this year for what is it, the second year in a row now, and or maybe even the third year in a row now, and new quarterback in the building, CJ Stroud. So I want to ask you, War, how do you feel about this 6.5 win total? Is it accurate? Is it too high? Is it too low? Where are we at with the Houston Texans?
I think it's too. After seeing CJ Stroud, I have determined that the win total of 6.5 is too high. I never believed in the Texans doing anything of note. I think their whole operation they're running over there is a little bit odd. Even though I like their coach, just the circumstances of how he was hired, that was a little bit odd to me. Yeah, man, that's too high. I don't see it. It's weird. Like the Texans have little, they have players here and there that I like individually. Like Nico Collins. I like Nico Collins. I wouldn't mind him being on my team. I like Damian Pierce. I mean, I drafted him in one of our leagues and then he blew up after I traded him. But they have a couple guys I like over there, but as a team, as a whole, I just don't like the nucleus of that team.
Yeah.
And I don't think in real life or fantasy for that part. And yeah, 6.5, like I'm surprised they even put that win total that high. I think 4.5 or 3.5 would have been more apropos.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough for sports books, right? They don't want to give it to you at 3.5 because then at that point going over is pretty easy to do. But
Mhm.
I do think this whole division as a unit is kind of in transition. It kind of looks like there's a lot of change happening in the division. I mean, we'll talk about it as we go on, but the Colts, the Titans, and then the Jaguars. The Jaguars seem like the only
So
team
ass.
that is coming in consistently. So let's talk about the guys. And for the record, I do think that 6.5 is too high. I would probably be going the over there for the Houston Texans. Not that I don't believe in CJ Stroud. I think it'll be a little bit of a slow year. Let's let's just talk about the guys that he's going to be throwing the football to. Nico Collins, John Mechie, Robert Woods, Dalton Schultz. Like those are some of the weapons. But you see here, we have the Superflex ADPs. And this is straight off of Underdog. And so these are all of the guys from the Houston Texans being drafted in the top 200. So CJ Stroud is the first guy off of the board at the ADP of 63.5. That's good for QB 26. And he's their first player. So QB 26 is their first player off the board. Running back Dameon Pierce, ADP of 86.3. That's good for running back 22. Nico Collins, ADP of 142.3, good for wide receiver 55. Dalton Schultz, ADP 147.7, good for tight end 13. Devin Singletary, ADP 163.6, good for running back 48. And then John Mechie, the third, rounds it out, just barely cracking that top 200 with an ADP of 195. And that's good for wide receiver 76. And so I'm sure at the time that this video is released, these ADPs will have shifted around a little bit because guys are already moving up and down just off of these preseason games. But I don't expect anything significant with these ADPs to change. So how do you feel about these ADPs, War? Is there anything that stands out to you? I mean, how do we feel about the fantasy football options for this team?
I feel like a lot of those guys, I don't know. It's hard to believe Chase Claypool couldn't get in the top 100, 200 with some of these guys that are on here. Um, okay, Mechie and Nico Collins haven't really proven anything, like as far as I'm concerned. Dalton Schultz, he's definitely a top 200 fantasy player. Same for Devin Singletary in my mind. I think Devin Singletary is a nice little utility piece to come off your bench in a bye week. Stroud, obviously, Stroud has to be up there. And I think Dameon Pierce absolutely has to be up there. So I'm just a little bit surprised that I'm not surprised that Mechie and Collins are in the top 200, but definitely Mechie more so than Collins.
Yeah, I mean, and I think too, one thing that's to note is that two of their wide receivers are not in the top 200, and that's Robert Woods and Tank Dell, which both of them could end up being starting wide receivers this year. I think there's a very good chance. I think if I was going to draft one of these guys, I would draft Nico Collins. I think he has the highest upside in the wide receiver room for 2023. Tank Dell's maybe a decent stash for you in a dynasty league or something like that. But I wouldn't. A lot of people are overreacting to the preseason performance. I wouldn't go crazy to get Tank Dell on my rosters. He's still undersized, and I just don't think it's going to be an efficient offense. But I think Robert Woods is. It sounds gross because he's older, and we've kind of got that name fatigue with Robert Woods. But he's
Mm-hmm.
coming off the board as wide receiver 87 with an ADP of 223. I just don't see a world outside of an injury plagued season where Robert Woods is wide receiver 87.
I mean, but Robert Woods having an injury plagued season is definitely a world that can exist.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, I don't disagree. I just think he's probably the best value on this roster. And I think you're right too. Devin Singletary is probably a decent value too, coming off the board as running back 48. I think he's going to be utilized. They signed, if people don't remember, they signed him very early in free agency this season. So he was a guy that they were looking at. They went out, they got him, they brought him into the building, interviewed him, all that stuff, put pen to paper, and they did it quickly. So they must have liked what they saw out of Devin Singletary. They must have a role that they want to see him in. And keep in mind, who is the head coach coming from? Where is he coming from? It's the San Francisco 49ers. And what do the San Francisco 49ers
yeah,
tend to do with running backs?
A million running backs.
Yeah. So I think Singletary could find his way into a role this year. Dameon Pierce, of all of the pieces, he would be the number one, I think, for fantasy football in 2023.
Yeah.
Last year, 12.8 fantasy points per game, good for running back 20. Like I said, he's being drafted as running back 22 right now. So it seems like he's accurately priced. If the offense is a little bit more efficient, which there's a world where it can be. If they are a little bit more efficient, maybe he finishes inside of the top 15. But I think a low end RB2 is pretty much what Dameon Pierce is.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I agree.
So, all right, man. Well, I think that's all we need to talk about for the Houston Texans. Actually, you know what? I'm going to bring up one more piece because you touched on him, but Dalton Schultz, he's being drafted as tight end 13. An ADP of 147.6, I think is what it was, right? It's ADP of 147.7. So Dalton Schultz, he kind of feels like a value. If I'm a roster, maybe in a redraft league or um, just a single season league or maybe even a dynasty league where I have punted the tight end position and I want to kind of shoot for some guys that could be streamable or have some volume later in the year. I think Dalton Schultz is one of those guys because with the wide receiver core that they have there, Nico Collins, Mechie, Dell, Woods, there's a chance that Dalton Schultz could be the number one receiving target in this offense. He could be the number one guy in the offense. And if he is, and if he gets 100 plus targets, um, he could be valuable enough for a team that punted the tight end position. So I think he's kind of a value play at the tight end position too.
I agree. Yeah. I would definitely have him amongst the streamable tight ends for this upcoming season.
Let's do a little game because we talked about some of these guys on the last episode. So Dalton Schultz or Irv Smith.
Me personally, I would roll the dice with Irv Smith.
You would. Okay, I would go
Yeah.
Dalton Schultz. Would you go Dalton Schultz or Sam Laporta in 2023 only, not Dynasty?
Hmm. I just think CJ Stroud is so trash. Um, because it takes tight ends so long to develop, I would go for Dalton Schultz.
Okay. Um, Musgrave or Schultz?
Schultz
Okay.
for the same reason.
You're gonna take Kmet over Schultz, right?
Yes.
I am too. Let's see. We'll go to the AFC North because we were talking about those teams. Are you going to take? Well, let's not talk about Mark Andrews. Obviously, that one's easy. Isaiah Likely or Dalton Schultz?
I like Likely, but I would take Schultz.
Okay.
Schultz is a starter, Likely as a backup.
Njoku?
And Joku, yeah.
I'll take Njoku. And then who's the last team that I'm forgetting? Cincinnati, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Freiermuth. You're going to take Freiermuth.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so he's kind of this guy that's a low end guy, and but I think there's value. I really do think there's value. It's not a sexy pick that you want to take over a bunch of guys, but you could shoot for worse tight ends that late in your drafts.
Yeah.
But that is all we have for the Houston Texans. Let's move over to another team in the AFC South that is projected 6.5 wins as well. And that's going to be the Indianapolis Colts. So a team that, again, like I said, for the Houston Texans, they're in transition as well. New head coach, new quarterback of the future over there in Indianapolis. And maybe even some question marks with Jonathan Taylor at the running back position. So my question for you, War, is how do you feel about the Colts? They are coming off of a season in 2022 where they were 4-12-1. So obviously good enough to go draft Anthony Richardson early in the draft. And how do you feel about this team? And how do you feel about the 6.5 wins?
I feel pretty good about the 6.5 wins. I mean, you have to look at it like this. I can see them, even though they always play them tough. So let me preface it by that. There's a scenario where I can see them beating the Texans twice. I I could also see them. This division is so bad. I struggle to remember who's in the division sometimes. I can
Titans
see them
and
beat.
Jags.
I can see them beating the Texans. The Titans just look like a horrible team to me. I don't think they could beat them twice though. So between the Titans and the Texans, I can see the Colts getting 3 wins. So right there, so that's almost half of the wins that they need right there. Um, I think this team has enough. I think they have enough to do decent. Um, Shane Steichen, I can see him doing some things to get them in the right direction. So 6.5 wins, but like just barely, like 7 wins. I don't see them winning too many more than that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I somewhat agree. I think for me, I would tend to lean the under on the 6.5 wins, and um, just first year head coach, raw rookie quarterback, and for what it's worth, though, he looked all right in his preseason opener, and he played a tough Bills defense. So, um, I think there's going to be growing pains like there is with any rookie quarterback, and we're going to talk about all of them today because they're all in the South Division. So, um, I just think even though the division is bad, it's between them and the Texans for the worst, in my opinion. And I think the Colts have a little bit better of a roster, but at the end of the day, I just don't want to bet the over on this team, especially with the question marks with Jonathan Taylor, because there's question marks
Yeah.
on whether Jonathan Taylor is going to be playing or not. And let's just talk about some of the guys that are on this team that are in the top 200, and the list is short. War, it is very, very short. They only have 4 players being drafted in the top 200 of Superflex ADPs, and those guys are going to be Anthony Richardson being drafted with ADP of 21.1. That's good for QB 13. Being drafted as a top 13 quarterback in fantasy football for 2023. Jonathan Taylor off the board, ADP 33.5, good for running back 5. Michael Pittman Jr., ADP of 96.6, good for wide receiver 34. And then Alec Pierce, ADP of 172.8, good for wide receiver 68. So with only 4 guys with high enough ADPs to crack the top 200, how do you feel about this team's fantasy football options here, War?
I'm a little surprised that Josh Downs couldn't even get squeak on the top 200. I don't know. I'll say this: their list is very short, but they have two positions where they have one the top guy. They have a top 13 quarterback, and they have a top what? Like you said, he was running back
5.
5. So top 5 running back, and Michael Pittman. He's probably not too far down the list either. So I mean, fantasy wise, you can get something out of the Colts offense. Real life, like you said, it's up in the air. I definitely think the Jags will sweep them. We'll see, man. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing for me is from a dynasty perspective, I don't mind having Anthony Richardson. But if we're talking 2023, this year only, maybe for my redraft rosters, the cost of admission for the Anthony Richardson amusement park is way too expensive for me. Quarterback 13, that's putting him
That's too much.
above a lot of good quarterbacks. And just to give you an idea, I think I was working on some of my redraft um, rankings for my quarterback positions just last night. And keep in mind, this is for 6-point passing touchdowns, so probably hurts Anthony Richardson a little bit more than your 4-point passing touchdown leagues. But in my 6-point passing touchdown leagues, I have Anthony Richardson uh, low like 2023 range. Like that's where I have him. So kind of a low end QB2 for your roster, maybe a QB3. So it's just going to depend how it is for him this year. I think I just think there's going to be growing pains. That's really my biggest thing about it. And I'm still interested to see what happens with Jonathan Taylor because I talked about it earlier this offseason. And Jonathan Taylor's coming off of a 2022 where he was averaging 13.3 fantasy points per game. That was good for the 17th overall running back from a
Mhm.
points per game standpoint. And he's being drafted top 5. Does Anthony Richardson help him or hurt him is still to be seen. I think from a check down standpoint, from a reception standpoint, which again wasn't a huge part of his game, 28 last year, 40 in the year before. I think it's going to hurt him there. And does Anthony Richardson vulture some of these goal line touchdowns is still to be seen, because if he starts doing that, it could get messy for Jonathan Taylor.
I mean, we'll see, man. I think this is really a wait and see type of situation. Like the team I root for has Justin Fields, and I remember how useless Justin Fields was his rookie year. So I
Yeah.
always think about that when I think about Anthony Richardson, because guys like Justin, even though I still think Justin is a more polished passer than Anthony Richardson, even as rough as his rookie year was, I think it was more about not being able to read defenses, not having a good offensive line, and have an idiotic coaching staff. I don't think the Colts have an idiotic coaching staff. I think their offensive line is better than what the Bears had, but I still remember the not reading the defenses part. And I think Justin Fields finished like in the 30s, like higher than 32. So that means like there are backups better than him.
Yeah. But he didn't play the full year though, right? Like he sat the first 4 games.
Yeah, he didn't. And for what I understand, I think the Colts are also coming into this like with the idea of utilizing Anthony Richardson's legs, which in Justin Fields' first season, they really didn't use his legs at all. So
yeah,
we'll see how it goes. But I do want to also note that the Shane Steichen offense is also has a wrinkle of the Andy Reid offense, if I'm not mistaken. And when you think Andy Reid, you think Chicago, you think Matt Nagy. So we'll see. We'll see. Because some of those guys are just like some of those coaches. How can I put it? They want you to run their offense as opposed to doing what's best for the player.
Yeah.
And so that's why, the bottom line of what I'm trying to say pretty much is that for that to be him to be the 13th quarterback coming off, that's way too risky. That's way too risky of a spot. And in terms of him vulturing touchdowns for JT, you're damn right that's going to happen, because it's almost like if he's not vulturing touchdowns from JT, then do you really want to take him at 13?
Yeah, you got to pick and choose.
You got to pick one or the other. Like, there's going to be some fool out there that's going to roster JT and Anthony Richardson, and that's going to be a pretty dumb idea.
They both can't score a rushing touchdown.
Yeah, no, they both can't score.
I think another thing to note too, though, like you said, is he's coming from the Eagles, and we saw Shane Steichen, being the offensive coordinator for Jalen Hurts. He kind of helped him piece it together, figure it out. Obviously, Nick Sirianni played a role in that as well, but Shane Steichen being the offensive coordinator had to have had some type of impact there. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think
the same thing about Andy Reid and Mahomes. I mean, about Matt Nagy and Mahomes. So.
Yeah. Well, for what it's worth, though, I think that Anthony Richardson, and you brought up the Justin Fields comparison, is I think 2022 Justin Fields will more so be 2024 Anthony Richardson. 2023 is probably not the year that Anthony Richardson takes the league by storm, but it would not surprise me if next year Anthony Richardson is, surpassing that quarterback 13 ADP.
Yeah, I mean, the difference being with me, I agree with you 100%. I think the only difference will be that instead of whereas Fields started his ascent mid-season of 22, I think going into 24, Anthony Richardson will already be doing some of the things Fields was doing in the middle of last season. So,
totally.
But he by no means will ever be Justin Skylar Fields. I think that's his middle name. He will not be Justin Skylar Fields.
Hopefully you didn't butcher his middle name and call him something else. But
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I'm looking as we speak.
With that being said, I think we should move on to the other team
Got it
or the
right.
second place team in the division. And I say second place, projected second place. These are just DraftKings over unders on the total wins. It's going to be the Tennessee Titans, and the Tennessee Titans are coming off of a season last year where they were 7-10. They're now projected 7.5 wins. And one guy, funny, I forgot to put him on this graphic as I was making it because he's so new to the team. But DeAndre Hopkins is there now, and this is a seven
Oh
and a
man,
half
I
win
forgot all
team.
about that.
Uh, how do you feel about this roster war? Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill, Chigakonkwo, Treylon Burks, DeAndre Hopkins, and then obviously the rookies Will Levis and Tajay Spears. Some maybe Will Levis plays this year, maybe not. It's going to depend on Ryan Tannehill, and if Levis plays, I'm assuming they're going to go under the 7.5 wins. But how do you feel about the line, and how do you feel about the team as a whole for this season?
I think I'll give them the over, but I'll have indigestion while I do it. While I do it. I think they have some good veterans anchoring that team. So I think with Hopkins, Derrick Henry, and the husk of Ryan Tannehill, I think they could at least piece together 8 wins, especially with some of the young guys in there, Treylon Burks, guys like that. I think they could piece together eight wins, and possibly even, especially because they're going to be able to feast on the division that's bad. Like you
Yeah.
said, two of the bottom teams in the division are the Colts and the Texans. And just like I said with the Colts, they should be able to squeeze a few wins out of those games. So I think I'll get them the over reluctantly.
Yeah, no, I agree. 7.5 wins, like you said, they play in a division where they should be able to get three pretty easily between the Texans and the Colts, especially if I'm projecting them to go under both of those teams to go under their win totals. And then I just pulled up their schedule just because I was curious. I wanted to make sure that I had a pretty accurate idea for what it looks like. And there's some teams on here that they I think they could beat. It's not like it's a very easy schedule, but there's some teams on here. They could beat the Falcons. They could beat the Buccaneers. They could beat the Steelers. Probably they could beat the Panthers. Maybe maybe the Dolphins. Maybe the Seahawks. Like there's some teams in here that maybe they could win a couple in here, and 7.5 wins doesn't seem too hard for them. But at the end of the day, man, I think this is a team too that I think I'm sorry to say this because I'm sure that there's going to be some Titans fans that disagree with the statement and don't want to hear this side of my argument, but it feels like a team that is hanging on to that window. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
just really hanging on to that window that they've had where they've been a competitive team, because they've been a very competitive team in this division for the last couple of years now, and it feels like they're just like on the edge of losing it, and they don't. It's like that team in your dynasty league that refuses to tank. They just like really want to hold on. The Fandangos of the world, right? Like they really want
Yeah,
to hold on.
he does used to be.
Yeah, and it's like, dude, throw in the towel, we'll rebuild this for a year or two and get better. And they keep buying old vets, and they're doing all. Anyways, that's what these Titans feel like to me. They don't feel like a team that really has a real chance to win a Super Bowl. And I mean, I do not think that they can win this division. I think Jacksonville's too good. But
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, man, that's how it feels for me. So I think I will go with the over on the 7.5 wins. 7.5 feels pretty low. But these are the players that are being drafted within the top 200. And, the first guy off the board for them is Derrick Henry. He's coming off the board as ADP of 39.8. That's the running back 8 overall. Then DeAndre Hopkins with an ADP of 70.5. That's good for wide receiver 24. Then Ryan Tannehill, the presumable starting quarterback for the whole season for the Titans, is going to be ADP of 79.1. Good for quarterback 29. Then Treylon Burks, 110. That's good for wide receiver 41. Chigoziem Okonkwo, ADP of 147.4. Good for tight end 14. then Tajay Spears and Will Levis, like I said, those rookies, good for quarterback 35 and running back 54. So, my question for you is, War, obviously Henry is being the most sought after player on this lineup and on this team for fantasy football. Do you think that that is accurate still? How confident are you in Derrick Henry? And then how do we feel about the receiving options here?
When you put it on paper like that, it looks pretty good, to be honest. To be completely honest, it looks pretty good on paper. One thing I will say is that Tajay Spears, his ADP already is up. His ADP is up. He looked excellent against the Bears yesterday. I'm not even gonna
What's
lie.
what was his ADP on this? 176.5. He's currently now sitting at 176.6. So he actually went down a tiny bit.
Oh, geez, that's the Justin Fields hype took him down too. Because you know what I find funny, and just like side note about that game. So I was looking for the NFL highlights,
Mm-hmm.
NFL highlights, and you know how to show highlights for both teams, right? In
Mm-hmm.
about a 5 minute video or so. It starts off. The video starts off with the play where Fields threw to DJ Moore. They completely omitted the Titans' first possession because the Titans were up 7-0,
Yeah.
where Tajay Spears butchered the Bears on the opening drive and scored the touchdown. I think he ran in a touchdown, and I remember that in our group chat. Let you guys behind the curtain. Our group chat, I went in there and I said how bad the Bears defense is going to be this year, and I said that after watching Tajay Spears just run through them like a hot knife through butter. So I don't know why his ADP went down point zero. I mean 0.1, but let it continue to go down because then I might take him because the Titans are very much a team where you're just waiting for the bottom to fall out. And when that bottom falls out, Tannehill's going to get benched. Henry, if he gets hurt, that's it. The minute he gets hurt, I'm convinced Tajay Spears takes over the backfield. The minute he gets hurt. The minute he gets hurt.
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
almost like Titans are a team that they have their, I don't know if they're geniuses or idiots. They have their first line of vets, but they kind of have all the heir apparents lined up behind them. You
yeah.
got Burks waiting behind Hopkins. You got Levis, whether he sucks or not, waiting behind Tannehill. You got Spears waiting behind Henry. So I mean, if those young players are good, then the Titans they don't have to fall back or take it. I still think they still will need to retool, but yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to do like a competitive rebuild, it feels like. And that's why what I mean where it feels like they're trying to like hang on to that competitive window. But at the end of the day, I don't know, but I've been talking about Tajay this offseason, and I was if you go back and look at some of our shorts, there's a YouTube short that I made. I think it still is getting views to this day. In fact, one of my shorts that I've been making waves with the last couple days, it's been getting like trickle in views from random people, was Elijah Higgins, because I guess Elijah Higgins had a pretty decent day. He had a couple catches for the Dolphins, but Tajay Spears is getting some views on there as well. They're starting to trickle in because Tajay did have a good day, and I was talking about how he was utilized as a receiver and as a runner there at Tulane, and he could be a complementary piece to Henry. I don't think he's going to be fantasy relevant as long as Henry is healthy. But like you said, if Henry goes down and Henry's getting older, man, we say it every year, and I know it sounds like squeaky wheel, but let's just pull up Derrick Henry right now because he is I want to say he's 30 right now, right? 29.6. He'll be 30 when the season starts for the most part. Um, but last year, still number 4 overall in fantasy points per game with 18.9, played in all 16 games. He's just a beast, man. He's a beast. And if the wheels fall off, Tajay could be decent. But I think for the most part, I want to talk about some of these other guys because I think Tannehill is somewhat of a value for your superflex leagues because Ryan Tannehill is being drafted, like I said, quarterback 29. And last year, I know it wasn't the best year for Ryan Tannehill last year, But even last year, he was quarterback 23 from a fantasy points per game standpoint, and now they've added DeAndre Hopkins. So, low end QB2, but you're getting him as a QB3 in your drafts. I think there's a value on Ryan Tannehill. Also, I just really want to hear your opinions on DeAndre Hopkins because he's the new hotness in Tennessee. How do you feel about Hopkins being drafted as wide receiver 24? Does it feel fair?
Hopkins is a curious case, man. At one point, it feels fair. At another point, it doesn't. It's a part of me that feels like he's not going to have the same level of success in Tennessee he had in Arizona or Houston. But at the same time, I don't want to write him off too quick because I think the volume for him will be there. So, I mean, if I had him on my roster, I'm definitely trying to get away with having him no higher than my wide receiver 3 in my starting lineup.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think when you go back and you look at like the last couple seasons, he's played in 10 or less games the last 2 years due to suspensions for PEDs or just injuries. It's tough to value or to put a pin on whether or not DeAndre Hopkins has gotten to that age where, the body starts to kind of give up. Because that does happen here in, the NFL. It's a tough, gruesome game. And at the end of the day, when you get to a certain age, you just can't get hit the same way anymore.
Yeah.
And so it's tough to decide on whether that has happened to DeAndre Hopkins or whether it was just a fluke, year of injuries and then the PEDs. Who knows what goes into that. But when you look at just fantasy points per game last year, 16.9, which was good for the wide receiver 9 in fantasy football. When he was on the field, he was balling out. Now he was playing with Kyler Murray, and I would assume that you would feel like Kyler Murray is an upgraded from Ryan Tannehill.
He was playing with Kyler Murray and steroids. Keep going.
And he also was playing in an offense that he was familiar with that was not run heavy, was pass heavy. Now this offense is run heavy. This is Ryan Tannehill, and this is a offense that he's not familiar with. My whole point getting into this conclusion of wide receiver 24, I mean, it doesn't feel risky to draft him at wide receiver 24. It feels like there could be a value there. But when I look at some of the guys that are going around DeAndre Hopkins, I'm going to, list them out for you and you tell me if you would prefer them over Hopkins, because at wide receiver 24, he is being drafted in the same tier as, let's just go through them and you'll tell me Hopkins or the other guy. So starting at wide receiver 19, Keenan Allen.
Hell no.
You prefer Keenan?
Hell yeah.
Okay. Judy?
Man, that's tough. I might take Hopkins over Judy, man. In the redraft format.
Yeah. Christian Watson. I'd take Hopkins. Yeah. Drake London. DJ Moore.
Who else?
Terry McLaurin. We're now talking guys that are being drafted under Hopkins. So McLaurin is under Hopkins, and you're taking McLaurin. Brandon Ayuk. Mike Williams.
Now you're getting to where it's kind of even.
It's Mike Williams, Deontay Johnson, Hollywood Brown. That's kind of the tier.
Yeah. The guys who are wide receiver 2/wide receiver 3s.
Yeah. Christian Kirk's in that tier too.
I'm taking Hopkins over that group. I'm surprised Drake London and those guys are higher than DJ Moore. That's kind of surprising.
Yeah, it's ADPs are interesting this year, but I think, based on kind of what you and I just did, for the most part, he seems fairly priced.
Yeah.
There's, maybe a couple guys you'd rather have here and maybe a couple guys you'd rather not have, but at the end of the day, he feels fairly priced. And then last thing that I want to talk about for the Titans is Chigoziem Okonkwo. Actually, should we touch on Treylon? I feel like we're kind of disrespecting Treylon by not talking about him. Should we talk Treylon because he's currently being valued as the let's see, I'm trying to pull it back up. He's currently being valued as the wide receiver 41. This is a run heavy offense as the wide receiver 2. Do you project him to be the wide receiver 2 on this offense?
I mean, y'all project him to be the wide receiver too on the offense. I just think there's no point in not disrespecting Treylon Burks. I mean, he hasn't done anything. He's in a run heavy offense. Like, give us something to respect him about. Like, even if you told me he was like wide receiver 70, I'll be like, okay, he's wide receiver 70. Like, it's kind of like that's where I am on him. Okonkwo, I don't really know. But honestly, I've ignored Okonkwo because like the Titans haven't had a decent tight end since like Delaney Walker.
Yeah.
like so like I was just like I know a lot of people love him. He's just never been someone that's been on my radar.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at these guys, and I'm just pulling up some of the stuff because Treylon Burks last year, 444 receiving yards on 54 targets for 33 catches, played in 11 games, just had the whole wide receiver room to himself. It felt like, and he didn't do anything with it. 8.6 fantasy points per game, good for wide receiver 56. So, like you said, he hasn't done anything yet. I guess it's still to be seen, but I tend to operate with the uh, feeling that if the Titans thought that Treylon Burks was that dude, they wouldn't have went after Hopkins as hard as they did.
Right.
And
Right. That's the reason.
and they went after Hopkins pretty hard. They got in a bidding war with the Patriots and some other teams. And at the end of the day, man, maybe Treylon Burks is just a wide receiver too, and that hurts for dynasty fantasy football managers that drafted Treylon to be that guy. But it is what it is. But as far as Chigoziem Okonkwo goes, uh, last season fantasy points per game was good for tight end 31, but it doesn't really tell the whole story because when you look at the game log in the back half of the season from weeks 13 to weeks 18, that was a 6-week span there. He had 4 finishes that were in the top 15, and 3 of those 4 were in the top 8. So he kind of came on late. The problem is they add DeAndre Hopkins, and so now he, instead of being the second receiving option, he is now the third receiving option in an offense that doesn't pass the ball a lot. So I think for me, there's not a lot of guys on this roster that I'm really seeking to draft. I might take Ryan Tannehill as my QB3. I'd be okay having him as a QB3 on my teams in a super flex league because I think there's value there. Obviously, in a redraft league, you're taking Derrick Henry high, and you're just gonna ride the hot hand with Derrick Henry that he's had in his career to this point. And then I think in a certain build you'd take Hopkins, but outside of those guys, I just really don't see myself drafting a bunch of Treylon or a bunch of Chigoziem Okonkwo or even in a redraft league. I wouldn't even touch like a Tajay Spears at a draft. He would be a guy you seek after, maybe on waivers as if Henry gets hurt.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
So, anyways, that's enough for the Tennessee Titans. Let's talk about the team that is projected to win the
Whew,
division.
tough
And
getting there.
yeah, man, we got after it on that one. But
Tough getting there.
let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars, man. They're a team that is projected to win 9.5 games. They are coming off of a season there in 2022 where they won 9 games, so actually lower than this number, but they're projected to be a little bit better. They are the favorites to win the division, and they went and got Calvin Ridley, added some Tank Bigsby, and then another year of Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, and Evan Engram signs a contract with them this offseason as an extension. How do you feel about the Jacksonville Jaguars? I feel like this is a pretty good football team, man.
I feel like the Jacksonville AEW Jaguars can win 10 plus games.
I agree.
Plus games. They have good coaching. They have good offensive weapons. They have a standard defense. Would you agree? Standard defense. I
Yeah.
think this team can, and with the division being so weak, I definitely could see this team getting somewhere. I hated on Trevor Lawrence, real tough the last couple of years because it's been basically Lawrence is good, Fields sucks.
Yeah.
But Trevor Lawrence made me a believer in the playoffs last year, and now I think he can go the extra mile. Not win a Super Bowl, no, absolutely not, but definitely lead his team to the playoffs and even get out of the first round like they did before. So we'll see. That's definitely. I think there's a scenario I can see where the Jaguars put themselves in that New England Patriots position of just owning the division for the foreseeable future, especially if Trevor Lawrence ends up being who we think he is.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a good football team. I think that they're um I mean, to me, it's not close. I don't think any of these other teams have a chance to beat the Jags for the division this year. It just feels like they've pretty much locked it up, which makes me interested to see actually what the odds are for them to win the AFC South. Because if it's pretty decent odds, I'll go bet it today. But let's talk about some of the guys that are going to be playing for this team and some of the guys that are going to be on your fantasy football rosters, because we project this to be a good team. So there's probably some good fantasy options here. And so Trevor Lawrence, he's coming off the board with an ADP of 8.8, which is good for your quarterback, 8 overall. So he's being drafted very highly. Calvin Ridley, his new wide receiver one, has an ADP of 51.6. That's good for wide receiver 16. And then Travis Etienne, 57.8, good for running back 14. Christian Kirk, ADP of 75.7, good for wide receiver 26. Evan Engram, ADP of 112.2, good for tight end 8. And then rookie Tank Bigsby, ADP of 145.9, good for running back 45. And then Zay Jones just continues to find his way here, which seems like nobody ever wants Zay Jones, but he tends to always be fantasy relevant for some reason. ADP 149.4, and that's good for wide receiver 58. So that is the guys in the top 200. How do you feel about these options for them as a whole? And I guess more importantly, let's talk the Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley potential there for this season.
Okay, let's talk about it. So outside of Trevor Lawrence, I think everybody else has a big question mark.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has a big question mark, even starting with Calvin Ridley. I understand who he was before his suspension. You know better than anybody. Calvin Ridley was one of my favorite players, but he sat out the entire year, and I'm just one of those people who have to see it to believe it after someone sat out that long.
He looks good so
And
far.
yeah, and got to see it against live bullets though, man. I
Yeah.
got to see it where they really got the defensive backs locking them up. But I'm definitely not. I'm definitely taking him. That rage you were talking about just now with Hollywood, Deontay,
Mm-hmm.
Hopkins, I'm definitely taking him above that Hopkins range. So he's wide receiver 16. Between 16 and 24 is where I'm taking Calvin Ridley.
Okay.
I'm not an ETN fan at all. I actually think the best thing for the Jaguars would be if Tank Bigsby becomes the start. Like if they have a true committee with him and
Yeah.
Tank Bigsby, I think that'll be the best outcome. And I also think that's why you heard it here, not first but second, because I'm sure Andrew probably said it before me. Get your shares of Tank Bigsby in the running back for running backs, because I think that's exactly what's going to happen. We're going to see him take on that James Robinson role. And this time they'll have a young guy, even though James Robinson's not old. They'll have a young guy doing the guy they drafted, and we gonna see how they rock. But
Yeah, man.
um,
I feel like you laid it up to me because I don't know if you remember, but months ago, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, this is right after the NFL draft. Actually, that's not even 3 or 4 months ago. That's a couple months ago. But right after the NFL draft, we did a show and I went in on Travis Etienne. I don't know if you remember it, but I was talking about the Tank Bigsby selection and why that was significant for Travis Etienne and how much I liked Tank Bigsby as a prospect and that I thought that he was going to carve out a role year one. And I know that there's a lot of debate on Twitter. Um, you know, people who are fans of ETN, people who roster ETN, they almost feel delusional to the point that they think that Bigsby is a non-factor, which to me is ridiculous because if you think that Bigsby is a non-factor, they wouldn't have used a third-round pick to draft him, and then he wouldn't be getting run with the first team in practice and things like that as well. And then to go on top of that, he looked good in their preseason opener. He looked really good for them. And so I think he is going to be a factor. How much? I don't know, but obviously enough that I think it's going to affect ETN. I just don't see ETN as being an RB1 in fantasy football. And he's not being drafted to be an RB1. I think what I said was running back 14, right? That's what I said. Running back 14. So he's being drafted around Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, Kenneth Walker, Aaron Jones. That feels fine. I think he actually has probably some more upside than those guys, but it's just I don't think you should think of him as a bona fide running back one, which is what I think
not
people
taking
thought
him
of
over
him as.
Najee.
You would take him over Najee?
I'm not.
Oh, not taking him. Yeah, I mean it just depends. But I think what I wanted to touch on was the Trevor Lawrence and the Calvin Ridley was in my redraft rankings. I do have Trevor Lawrence as QB8. That is where he is being drafted in underdogs as well. So it seems accurate to me. For Calvin Ridley, he is being drafted in the same tier as DK Metcalf, T. Higgins, Debo Samuel, Amari Cooper. It feels.
Give me your top 8 quarterbacks.
Yeah, I'm sure you would love to hear them, but I'm sure our league would love to hear them as
In
well.
no order.
In no order. So we'll go Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence. That's my top 8.
Sounds a lot.
Yeah, so Lawrence is at the end of that. Obviously, Mahomes and Allen are probably towards the top. You can piece the puzzle together, but for the most part, actually, you know what? Fuck it, dude. I'll just give it to you in order because this is. I don't give a damn if you guys know my order. I'm nice at this shit. I can get this shit anyways. I will tell you my order, and I'll adapt if you guys want to pick my fucking guys. Go for it. But if we're gonna do this for real, like fucking real analysts, and sorry, I apologize for my language, but if we're gonna do this for real, then I got to be able to give you guys the real deal, man. I can't hold nothing back. So Patrick Mahomes, number 1, Josh Allen, QB2, Jalen Hurts, QB3, Joe Burrow, QB4, Justin Herbert, QB5, Lamar Jackson, QB6, Justin Fields, QB7, Trevor Lawrence, QB8.
And are you taking any skill position player before
In
that?
those
If
top
you were
8?
doing it, yeah. Other than the quarterback.
In our Superflex league, it is 6-point passing touchdown. The only guy I would consider in those top 8 would be Justin Jefferson. He's the only one I would consider in those top 8. And
because of course you would, obviously, but I think anybody would.
I think I mean he's done enough to be considered there. And fuck the jersey in the back. Like he's done enough to consider that. But I would not take him over those top 5 that I listed. So at earliest for me, Justin Jefferson would be my number 6 overall player in a 6-point passing per touchdown Superflex league.
So you would be okay with Calvin Ridley going in the second round of a fantasy draft with 10 teams? That's basically yes.
No.
Yes.
No. I'm not okay with that.
Okay.
I would not be okay with that.
Okay. Because that's what I'm saying. It's kind of like the same thing we talked about with Anthony Richardson, where it's like you can do these otherworldly things, but quarterback 13. Then you got Calvin Ridley. It's like, we know who you are. You're a beast. You're a
Yeah.
beast. You're one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, but you set out a year. So am I willing to take you in even a non-super flex? Am I willing to take you in the second round?
It's going to be
Because even
tough,
if
right?
he's not, because in the super flex, if he's in super flex, was he third, fourth round?
Yeah, he's coming off with the ADP of 51, which means he's going late fourth, early fifth.
Okay. That sounds a little more acceptable.
Yeah,
That sounds a little more
but
acceptable.
here's the thing: like, is there a world where Calvin Ridley could be a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy football this season? Sure, I think there is a world where that could happen. However, let's talk about the probability of that happening. Is he going to be better than Justin Jefferson? Probably not. Better than Jamar
No.
Chase? Probably not. What about Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, AJ Brown? Probably not. CD
Cooper Cup?
maybe.
Maybe. Depending
CD
on him.
Lamb, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen. Like, there's guys that he's going to have to beat out to be that.
Yeah, I can't take him before any of those guys. Any of those guys.
So yeah, I mean, I think he's being accurately valued. But then as we look at some of these other guys, because they do have Evan Engram and Christian Kirk, how do you feel about those guys? Both of them seem to kind of have some value to them, I think.
Christian
Just
Kirk, to me, Christian Kirk is like a tier one flex option to me. Like when I think of this group of players are who I want to plug in week to week as a flex that help me win a championship, Christian Kirk is amongst the top of those guys. I think he can produce with Calvin Ridley on the team because I've seen him produce next to Hopkins. So
yeah. I mean, I think I think he's kind of a value. He is being valued right in that Hopkins tier that we talked about earlier. So it was like the Hollywood Browns, Deontay Johnsons. That's kind of where Christian Kirk is being drafted. But Evan Engram as well. Last year he was being, or he's being drafted as the tight end 8. Last year he was tight end 7 from a fantasy points per game standpoint, 10.4 points per game. Obviously no Calvin Ridley, so there's probably more targets to go around to Evan Engram. But I don't mind, having Evan Engram on my team as my tight end 1. Do you feel bad if Engram is your tight end 1?
I've never been an Evan Ingram guy. Never. So I mean, why I don't feel good with that. If someone else is comfortable with that, someone who doesn't have a grudge against Evan Ingram, then I wouldn't poo-poo it. It's just that in my world, Evan Ingram's like a mid to low end tight end too, because at the end of the day, I still don't trust his health. Um, yeah, that's why I'm with Mr. Evan
Okay.
Ingram.
Well, we're going to play the game one more time. I'm
All
going to give
right,
you the guys in the range. Evan Engram or David Njoku? They're back to
and
back.
Joku,
Okay. Evan Engram or Pat Fryermuth?
Frymouth,
Engram or Greg Dulcich?
Evan Ingram,
Engram or Dalton Kincaid?
Dalton Kincaid. It's like
Engram
my
or
son,
Dalton Schultz?
Ingram.
Okay. So seems like he's somewhat accurate as far as the ADP goes. I mean, you have Njoku and Fryermuth over him, and you have Kincaid over him.
Where's Komet?
I
Is Komet above him?
No, Komet's way down there, bro.
Okay, I'm taking Komet over Ingram too.
I'll tell you, Komet is below
I think
Gerald Everett and Tyler
let,
Higbee.
let me tell you this, and I think you know this already. I think Cole Komet is being vastly slept on. I think he has been vastly slept on, and it's not because I'm a Bears fan. It's just because some of these guys they have in his range are above him. I just don't see it because he's outproduced them already. So it's like
He's tight end 17 in rankings right now, and I will tell you, he is my third highest exposure at the tight end position, which means he's my third highest rostered tight end, only behind Dalton Schultz and TJ Hawkinson. I have those two guys above him as far as the exposure goes. But I've been drafting a lot of Cole Kmet this offseason. Just feels like a good value. Where he's
He's the only player that's been extended that's extension worthy so far on the team. There's a reason for that.
yeah. But to keep it, to keep it Jags, I think Ingram is a decent. I think he's being picked properly. I don't think there's a value on Evan Ingram. He's not a player that I'm actively seeking because I think that there's values later on in the drafts. And my philosophy is that if you're not getting one of the top ones, then you punt the position. And one of the top ones for me this year, I would say there's really only three. I really only think there's three that I feel very comfortable drafting. It's Kelsey, Andrews, Hawk. Those are the three that I feel very comfortable drafting.
And if your arm had to be twisted, Kittle.
Him or Pitts. I would say the next tier is Pitts and Kittle. That's like the next tier for me. And so after those two guys, I really am not playing around with the next group, and I'm just punting the position. So it depends. I would draft Kittle and Pitts depending on what round if they become a value. But the only ones that I really would target would be the three that I mentioned at the top. And so because Ingram falls in that tier, he's not somebody that I'm actively seeking. I'd rather punt the position at that point. But if Evan Ingram is your guy, I think it's a fair price. So that's really all I have to say about those JAG ADPs. But I think for the most part, everybody feels pretty good, and I think it'll be fun and it's very doable for you to get some Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley stacks this season in your drafts.
Yes, absolutely.
So, all right, well, let's go over to the NFC South. This show is going long, War. It's going long. We're diving deep into it.
Yeah.
So let's go to the NFC South. We're going to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and maybe not a lot to talk about over here because they are
This might be
projected.
pretty quick.
Yeah, they're projected 6.5 wins here. This is a team that is coming off of a. Let me see the record. Actually, I can't even remember their record. Oh, they're coming off of an 8-9 season where they actually won the NFC South. Now, keep in mind they had Tom Brady playing quarterback, and now new quarterback Baker Mayfield is in town. You see the guys on the board. How do you feel about a 6.5 win Buccaneers team?
This team's gonna be dog crap. I can see them getting like 6 wins, like spot on. I think they're even gonna move some of the guys we've come to know and love during the season because the NFL is starting to get more like the NBA now, like at the trade deadline. You're actually starting to see guys get traded. And I could definitely see Tampa Bay looking and saying, man, we suck mid-season and try to get rid of a Mike Evans or a Chris Godwin or guys like that. I think this is going to be a complete shit show this season. I'm not even going to pull punches on that. I don't see more than 6 wins out of this team. This team this team only got 8 with Tom Brady. And in my opinion, Tom Brady is still leagues better than Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask. So,
yeah, I mean, I think here's the reality of the situation, and to me, it's as a whole, the whole thing is messed up. I am not a fan. I am not an advocate for Todd Bowles. I don't think he's a good coach. Um, I just don't think he was the right choice as the successor to Bruce Arians. I think they really did mess up by not hiring what's his name, Raheem Morris. It's Raheem Morris, right? Um,
yeah.
yeah, I think they messed up by not hiring Raheem Morris. I think they could have even hired in house. Byron Leftwich would have been a good hire for them as well, as the offensive coordinator to kind of revive this offense. However, they hired Todd Bowles. I don't think Todd Bowles is a good coach. And again, you add Baker Mayfield. As much as I've been an advocate of Baker Mayfield in the past, I just know that he's not a quarterback that's going to win you a bunch of football games. I
The
think Baker
physical
Mayfield.
role player.
Yeah, man. Baker Mayfield is a good enough quarterback to be an NFL quarterback. The problem is he's falling into that category where he's like a bridge quarterback for your team to go get their next
Yeah.
starter. Or he is going to be like a very, very good backup, like the Jameis Winstons.
I think
And
to me, his ceiling is like Ryan Tannehill. I feel like if you put Baker Mayfield on the team, and I mean, I guess you could try to say the Cleveland Browns word this, but if you put Baker on a team where He doesn't have to make too many like decent plays, and you have a stud running back and an elite defense, I think you can do it. This
Mm-hmm.
team, this just isn't the team for him. Like he's
Yeah.
supposed to sit here and feed Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and still be able to like throw passes to like a Rashad White. This is just a horrible role for him. And I'm not sure Kyle Trask is even better. I think this team's going to be, like I said, I think this team's going to be trading pieces during the season because
Yeah.
there's going to be some team out there that's like, man, we have Chase Claypool, even though I know the Bears, and I hate that I keep bringing up the Bears, but I think this is actually a good reason to bring him up. Like the Steelers got a second round pick for him during the season. What can you get for Mike Evans or Chris Godwin or one of those guys?
Yeah.
Because I just don't see Tampa Bay doing anything. I think the wheels are going to fall off. Guys are probably going to start complaining. We know Mike Evans; he's a temperamental guy. So I mean,
Well, we've already seen some hypothetical trades on Twitter and some rumors and things about how Mike Evans would be a really good complementary piece to have the Jets trade for and put next to Garrett Wilson. Um, and so there have been some rumors like that. I think when it's all said and done, man, we've even seen Baker Mayfield where last year I think he looked good when he was with the Rams. I think he did look decent. The problem is that he just doesn't win a bunch of football games. So let's talk about the ADPs of the guys. But this is a very short list as well, just like that Indianapolis Colts list that we showed. But it's 4 guys, man. Chris Godwin, Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, and Rashad White. And you see the earliest that any of these guys is being drafted is pick 88.8 for Chris Godwin. So nobody is going early. Godwin's coming off the board the earliest as wide receiver 31. Baker Mayfield is quarterback 32. Mike Evans, wide receiver 35. And then Rashad White, running back 28. So there's not a lot of faith in any of these guys at all from a fantasy standpoint. The highest drafted being Chris Godwin as a wide receiver 3 for your fantasy football rosters. So, I mean, are you drafting these guys, War? Are you looking at these guys? Is there can you find a silver lining here?
I'll let you into my draft strategy a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm in a draft, I'm going to have, and this is a super flex because at this point, what freak weirdo will not play in a super flex?
You're not playing super flex. What are you doing?
Yeah. I'm taking both of my quarterbacks before I take any of those guys. I'm taking all 3 of my starting wide receivers. And then and this is like unless Kelsey, Andrews, or one of those guys are there. Like to make it short, Baker would not be one of my top. I wouldn't be starting Baker. And Godwin and Evans, I'm only interested in them if they're my flex spots. Same with Rashad White.
Yeah, I mean, I think I disagree with you to an extent there. As far as the Baker Mayfield thing goes, I have him on my do not touch list for redraft.
Yeah.
He's just somebody I'm not touching. When I'm on a redraft in a redraft league, I'm not drafting anybody who I think can lose their job, especially at a super flex quarterback position. So that's something that I'm not doing. I don't like the value on Mike Evans. I don't think that Baker Mayfield projects to get Evans the ball the way that he's been getting the ball in the past, which is that deep ball. That's not Baker's game. Godwin, I don't mind. I don't mind Godwin because I think him and Baker can kind of at least have some type of relevancy. And if you're drafting Godwin as a wide receiver 3, I think worse things have happened. He's somebody that I wouldn't mind having if the price is right. However, in the tier that he's going with the Hollywood Browns, the Deontay Johnsons and those types, I do prefer those guys over Godwin. And so it's hard to see a bunch of teams where I do have Godwin on them in a redraft format, but I'm coming around on Rashad White. I'm really coming around on Rashad White. And the value of Rashad White right now, where I said he's being drafted, what did I say his running back was? Running back 28.
Yeah.
It's the 100th guy off the board, running back 28. I'm just going to give you one stat. Do with it as you will. But but we play in full point PPR leagues. I think a lot of people play in full point PPR leagues. Even if you play in a half point PPR league, keep this stat in mind. Uh, Obviously, we value running backs that can get a lot of receptions, get a lot of targets. We've seen guys like Austin Eckler in years past dominate for fantasy football because they're getting the football passed to them a lot. Uh, the highest rate of targeting running backs in 2022, the number one guy who targeted his running back the most was Baker Mayfield at a total of 30%. 30% of his dropbacks, he threw it to the running back position. If Rachaad White is going to be fantasy relevant, it's going to be because of this reason right there. Rachaad White is going to have to catch a lot of passes. And if he does catch a lot of passes, running back 28 is a value for him because he projects to get the bulk of the load as far as the running usage goes. And then if he's getting 60, 70, dare I say 80 receptions on top of that, we're looking at a guy who could be top 15 at the position, and you're getting him as running back 28.
Yeah, I think I'm high on Rachaad White too. I think any of them, and when you put it like that, I definitely think the dink and dunk players on the team are definitely going to thrive with Baker behind center. Um, Godwin likes to play inside. Rachaad White's a running back. That's Baker Mayfield's jam right there. Give a little tosses to the running back. I think Mike Evans is dead in the water.
Yeah, man.
Mike
He
Evans
seems
is
like
dead.
he seems like the worst pick of them all.
Yeah, and I feel like if I'm the Carolina Panthers at the trade deadline, I'm hitting them up and I'm saying, hey, can we get Mike Evans over here for a third round pick, and put him out there to help out our rookie quarterback. I think that would
Yeah,
be a decent little
fair
move
enough.
right there.
But there's not a lot of options. But I think of them, the silver lining is going to be Rachaad White. Rachaad White could break out for fantasy football this year, and if he does, it's going to be because of the checkdowns from Baker Mayfield. But you just brought up the Carolina Panthers, so I figure we should
Mm-hmm.
just go over and talk about them right now. Um, they are projected to win 7.5 games this year. They are coming off of a season where they won 7 last year. They had 7 wins last year. Somehow again found their way into the number one pick, and that's because they traded with you guys and gave you guys a pretty decent haul. But they do have a projection of 7.5 wins. New quarterback Bryce Young in town, and pretty much everybody is new for the most part. Hayden Hurst, Jonathan Mingo, Miles Sanders, Adam Thielen, DJ Shark, all of these guys are brand new. So how do you feel about the new look Panthers? Do you think 7.5 wins is low, high, or accurate?
I think it's accurate, and personally, I need them to win way less than that, but I think that's accurate. I think that's an accurate amount of wins for them.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think this is a good team. Um, there's going to be growing pains like there are with any rookie quarterback, and I've been, an advocate for Bryce Young and what he can do, but um, you know, I don't think here's what I'll say right away. I don't think Bryce Young is going to make them a 10-win team right away with this roster. That's not what's going to happen with Bryce Young. But I think he's good enough that he can get him to that 7.5, maybe 8-win team. Like I said, they won 7 last year, so why couldn't they win 8 right now with Bryce Young at quarterback? It is a division where they're going to be playing some teams that have some questions. The Buccaneers, the Falcons, the Saints are projected to win the division. Spoiler alert, but they also have new guys there. So it's an interesting division, but I wanted to talk about their fantasy options because they do have quite a bit of them. Not a lot of them are going to be your elite options, but these are the guys being drafted in the top 200. Bryce Young is the first guy off the board, ADP of 56.3. That's good for quarterback 25. Miles Sanders with an ADP of 80.2. That's good for running back 19. Jonathan Mingo, DJ Shark, and Adam Thielen all being drafted there pretty much in the same tier for wide receiver 65, wide receiver 69, and wide receiver 70. And then Chuba Hubbard is coming off the board at 186 with running back 58. Now, one guy who didn't make the list is Hayden Hurst. He has an ADP of 201, so he didn't get into the top 200, but 201 is damn near there, and he's being drafted as tight end 26. So when I look at these ADPs, War, the first thing that I see is that because Mingo, Shark, and Thielen all pretty much have the exact same ADP going in the exact same round, it tells us that drafters do not know who the wide receiver one is going to be. And I'm interested to hear your opinions. Who do you think is going to lead this team in receiving yards and receptions this year? Who's going to be the fantasy football wide receiver one for the Panthers?
I'm really surprised because I would have thought Thielen would have been the first wide receiver off the board for that
He's
team.
the last.
Yeah, that's kind of surprising. I think they should have put question marks all three of those receivers because I honestly think nobody knows. Bryce Young's pads are hella small. He's a small guy.
You
But he
talking about the
probably
picture?
yeah, I just
let's
looked at
let's look at it again.
Oh man, such a little guy, man.
He's up in the clouds, man.
His head's big, his shoulder pads are small. He just look like your average guy. Yeah, Mingo. I mean, in Dynasty, I'm taking Mingo first. In redraft, I'm probably taking Thielen first.
Okay.
And that's kind of like how I look at it. Shark is rosterable.
So it's funny because I actually prefer Shark over all of them in redraft.
You know, and that's kind of like the conflict I'm having too, which I'm surprised that you would continue your turn on Adam Thielen. You would continue your betrayal here.
I love Adam Thielen, man. Adam Thielen is a hell of a player. He's been an awesome guy for the Minnesota Vikings. I saw over the last couple of years, man, Father Time is getting at Adam Thielen. And I don't know if he has much left, man. I just think DJ Shark profiles as the now keep in mind, I think Mingo has the highest upside. He has the highest ceiling of all these guys. But DJ Shark is, I think, a combination of the highest floor and the maybe the second highest ceiling because he can catch the big play. He's running those plays that are big plays. It's just the reality is that there's pretty much none of them that I'm going to want to have on my roster. But if I'm going to take the shot, I'll take DJ Shark because I think he's going to have the most receiving yards for this football team when it's all said and done this year.
Miles Sanders is pretty much the only guy on that I trust out of all those guys.
Yeah. And let me say this. I think Adam Thielen leads the team in receptions. DJ Shark leads them in receiving yards. And probably DJ Shark leads that receiving group in touchdowns.
Yeah.
That's my guess. But you're right. Miles Sanders is a guy that I think at that value coming off the board is running back 19. You and I have said it multiple times this offseason. He's a value, man. He's a guy.
Zero running back to me.
Yeah, man. There's a world where I think he could be a running back one in fantasy football this year. I really think he could be.
Yeah.
It sounds crazy. I think Miles Sanders could be, and he's running back 19, guys. It just feels like the best value pick. I think he is the best value pick at the running back position in fantasy football this year. A guy that I have went and targeted in a bunch of leagues because the cost to get Miles Sanders is low. I think the production will be pretty high for him this year, and he feels safe. If they have to lean on the run game, he's going to get used a lot. And they're talking about using him in the receiving game as well. I think Bryce Young is a highly accurate quarterback. He's going to be able to he's smart. He's quick. He's going to get the ball out quickly. We saw it in the preseason game too. He was taking quick drop backs and then he was hitting a guy. And it wasn't like he was making like otherworldly plays. And keep in mind, it was a pretty modest day for him. But I saw enough that he was dropping back, boom, hits his first read, or boom, sees the first read, doesn't like it, gets to the second read, boom. And it was just quick. He's just a quick decision maker. He's a smart quarterback. And because of that, he's going to be smart to hit the check down when it's there. And I think Miles Sanders is going to be a beneficiary of that. I think a good value pick in fantasy football. And I want to talk about him because he's so close to that 200. But I feel like you got a little bit of interest in Hayden Hurst. Am I wrong?
I do have a little bit of interest in Hayden Hurst. I heard Hayden Hurst is having a very good training camp, and I think Hayden Hurst, while I wouldn't be comfortable with him as my lead zero tight end, I would not mind him being the backup tight end in the zero tight end like draft. Like if I could get Hayden Hurst towards the end of the draft, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and we know too
nice.
that we know those rookie quarterbacks, they like to hit the tight end. It's just it's been proven, and so Bryce Young might hit Hayden Hurst, and Hayden Hurst is somewhat athletic. I think there's some decent value there. The only guy we haven't talked about on here is Chuba Hubbard. Do you care about Chuba Hubbard at all, or is he mainly just a Miles Sanders handcuff?
He's a Miles Sanders handcuff.
I agree.
Not quite sure even why he's still on the team, quite honestly. But yeah,
He's good enough to be a backup, and that's really the story of Chuba Hubbard.
that's the story of Chuba Hubbard. Absolutely.
So let's get to these number 2 projected Atlanta Falcons. They are
Hmm.
projected at 8.5 wins here. And last year they came off a season where they were actually last place in the division with 7 wins. Keep in mind, this whole division finished between 7 and 8 wins. So they're projected at 8.5. They are projected to be number 2 overall. Uh, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Desmond Ritter, Bijan Robinson. How do we feel about this roster?
I give them a chance to win a division. I could see them getting 9 wins, to be honest. Because if you look at it and say, okay, I don't like Desmond Ritter. That's probably like the only thing you can really say about the Falcons. I don't like Desmond Ritter. Um, if he's just back there to make the right pass and hand the ball off to Bijan, he has everything he needs as far as help. He has a tight end. Sometimes pisses me off, but he has a tight end that's supposed to be a stud. He has a wide receiver that can go up and get it, and he has a generational talent at running back. So, I mean, I can see this team being a pretty decent team. Not 9 wins definitely seems like they're ceiling though. I don't see any scenario where they're anything more than 9 wins. But I could also understand someone going to under on them because they haven't proven anything yet.
Yeah, I think it's tough, man. Like I said, this that 8.5 win, it's always I think that's my least favorite line of all of these because it's just enough that it feels like you have to be a good football team to pass it, but it's
Mhm.
low enough that it's like you don't have to be that good of a football team though.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it feels like for the Atlanta Falcons to me. Let's talk about some of the ADP guys. I think really if it was, and to summarize this, if I was betting on this, I would probably go the under. And I think for me, it's because I am not a Desmond Ritter believer. But if
Mhm.
you believe in Desmond Ritter, then I think I could see you going over. But with that being said, Bijan Robinson is the highest sought after player for fantasy football on this team. Superflex ADPs of the top 200. He's going as running back 3 overall. ADP of 21.6 for Bijan Robinson. Wide receiver Drake London has an ADP of 68.9. That's good for wide receiver 22. And then Desmond Ritter coming off the board, ADP is 79.4, good for quarterback 31. Kyle Pitts, ADP 85.1, good for tight end 5. And then Tyler Algier, ADP 152.8, good for running back 46. So, this is pretty simple. It's a pretty short list. There's not a lot going on to it. But how do you feel about uh, these guys, and how do you feel about Bijan being the number 3 overall running back for fantasy football already?
I mean, he's a generational talent, so I understand why he's where he is. First thing that stands out to me about that list is Kyle Pitts because it feels like just a year ago that people were considering taking him right after Kelsey or right after Andrews, and I think people are finally starting to come down to earth on Kyle Pitts because Pitts has not lived. And to me, this is the year either Pitts is that because look, realistically, the Falcons are supposed to have 2 generational talents. Kyle Pitts is supposed to be a generational tight end, and Bijan's is supposed to be a generational running back. This is the last year where Pitts either proves that he is that generational talent, or he's going to slowly descend into that second tier permanently, where the guys like Kittle and
Goddard.
um, Goddard, guys like that are. And really, that's still us giving him credit because honestly, as someone who's owned Kyle Pitts on multiple teams, I feel like he hasn't even lived up to the standard of Kittle and Goddard. So
The hype for Kyle Pitts has been so high, and let's not discredit what he's done because he has been good. I mean, Kyle Pitts, when you go and look at obviously last year he dealt with the injury, and that's part of the
yeah,
reason why some people felt burned. But 2021 he had a 1,100 air yards and 1,000 receiving yards on 110 targets. That was before Drake London. But it's a team that he finished top 11 in fantasy points per game, but he was being valued and drafted like top 3, and so
yeah,
that's obviously not going to cut it for you. So it is. I totally agree with you here, and I do agree it is a prove it or kind of lose it season for Kyle Pitts. I want to see him. I want to see him be dominant, and if he's not dominant, you're right. He's not in the Kelsey Andrews tier. He's not, and we need to see it. And if he isn't, like you said, he's going to be in a different tier. But let's talk about Desmond Ritter because I said I'm not a truther, and I know we're kind of jumping around, but Bijan, RB3, I didn't even give my opinion on that. I think he's being drafted at the ceiling, but I don't mind it. The only thing that I think will keep him from finishing in the top, 5 to 8 at the running back position will be an injury. I think that's really the only thing that'll keep him from doing it. So you're drafting him at the ceiling. It's an expensive price to pay, but when you get a running back like that, you're not going to get a value on him. The hype's too high on him. Um,
yeah.
but let's talk Ritter because when you go back and you look at Ritter's attempts, keep in mind he only played 4 games last year, and weeks 15 to week 18, 26 attempts in 15, 33, 26, and 30 for the remaining couple weeks. His best finish in that time was 15.9 fantasy points, uh, lowest being 5.7. Pretty much the only week that he finished as a top 11 or a top 12 quarterback was in week 18 when none of the starters were playing. And the weeks that the starters were playing, 15 through 17, he was quarterback 28, 26, and 30. So he was a very low end quarterback for you.
Yeah.
Um, with the options on this team being London, Pitts, Bijan, it's going to me, it's going to be a point where either they elevate Ritter or Ritter hurts them and they are not going to reach the ADPs that they're being drafted at.
I think Bijan is safe. London and
Feels
Pitts,
scary.
it feels scary. It feels very scary. You definitely want London shares on your team. So this is how I look at London. And redraft, it'll be very difficult for me to feel comfortable with him as my wide receiver 3. It'll be
But he's
very
being
uncomfortable.
drafted. He's being drafted as a wide receiver 2.
I know, and that's ill advised. Um, in Dynasty, I don't mind so much
Yeah.
because I'm moving the ball. I'm proceeding through the assumption that Ritter is going to get replaced by somebody better than him at some point.
He may get replaced by Heineke at some point this year.
If he gets replaced by Heineke, then those guys' value will go back up.
I agree. But I think
Have you heard anything about how Ritter's looked at training camp or anything?
I haven't actually, and I
It
haven't
seems
been
like it's
super.
just been real quiet.
Yeah, and I haven't been super tapped into the Falcons, but I'm just not a Ritter believer. But I've to get back to Drake London, I've been having a really hard time. I'm always doing these drafts. I do a draft every day for the most part. Um, when it comes down to that range with Drake London on the clock in these single season redraft formats, I just can't get myself to press the button that much. I'm looking at the range. It's that Keenan Allen, Jerry Judy, DJ Moore, DeAndre Hopkins, Terry McLaurin. It's that range of players. And there's just too many guys in that range that I prefer over London. I feel like are safer over London. Um, and I'm trying to find my exposure to London this year because it's probably not very high. Um, yeah, I have him in 12% of my leagues, and that's with like over 30 teams drafted. So that is 3 leagues, 3 of my 30 that I have London in. it's just tough for me to press that button, man.
Yeah, 30 leagues.
Dude, I got, let's see, just right now, War. I am in, let's see, trying to pull this back up. I'm on the clock right now in a league where I'm doing a Bears stack. I have Justin Fields, DJ Moore, and Cole Kmet on that team. So I'm doing a Bears stack in that league. Pretty good roster. But I'm in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm in 7 drafts right now. They're all best ball leagues. But I do one like every single day. When you see me do them on Mondays, when I do these mock draft Mondays and I'm doing an underdog draft as a mock draft, I don't just do it on Monday. I do it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I do it every day. So I just record it on Mondays. But with that being said, man, I think with the guys on this team, I'm not targeting Desmond Ridder. He's in my redraft. He's in a do not draft list for me. I'm not targeting Desmond Ridder at all.
So he's over here with Baker.
Yeah, he's there with Baker. He's there with like who else is on my do not draft list? I mean, shit, there's guys on there, but Ritter's on there. I like Bijan this year. I think he's safe. Doesn't matter if Ritter sucks, he's going to be good. Pitts in London, I will take it at a certain cost, but the ADPs right now, I don't mind Pitts ADP. London's ADP is the one that I can't really get with right now. But that's how I feel about the Falcons. Do you have any objections?
No, not at all. It's like it's not too much to say about these South teams.
All right. Well, let's get to the last team in this division. They are projected to win the NFC South. We just saw them today actually play some preseason football. It is the New Orleans Saints. They are projected to go, or the projected win total is going to be 9.5 wins. Last year they had 7. New quarterback Derek Carr in the building. How do we feel about this team in 2023?
10 or 11 wins.
I agree.
10 or 11 wins.
They're the clear winner of this division, right?
I think they win a division. I think they may actually be like good enough to scare some people in the playoffs.
Okay.
I'm going that high. And that's considering who do we think, okay, who do we think is making the playoffs in the NFC this season? Just off the top of your head. Eagles and who else?
Well, let's go to the divisions. Who do we think wins the divisions? I think the Vikings win the North.
Okay.
I think the Saints win the South. The NFC West, it's going to be the Niners or the Seahawks. Those are probably both playoff teams.
Yeah.
And then which one am I missing? North, South, East. That's the Eagles. So, and probably I think the Cowboys can be a playoff team.
So we think what the last playoff spot will be between who, the Lions and the Cowboys?
Lions and Cowboys. Yeah.
Okay. So I forgot how the playoff seeding works now.
Well, let's think of it like this, right? Like, could the Saints scare the Lions? Absolutely.
Yes.
Could they scare the Vikings? Yeah, they could.
Yeah.
Could they scare the
Cowboys?
Yeah. Could they scare the Seahawks? Maybe.
Yeah.
The Niners? Probably not.
Yes.
Well, it just depends who's playing quarterback, I guess.
Who's playing quarterback? Yeah.
But that's the thing. They could end up being like, it could be like the Eagles and the Saints.
I kind of feel like the Eagles are the only team where the Saints should be like, oh shit, let's try to avoid them. Yeah. And I think the 49ers will probably be the second team where it's like, okay, let's kind of. But everybody else, I think they're gettable. I think, to me, the NFC is just wide open in general.
This is a good football team, man. And while we're talking about it, I mean, let's talk about the guys who are going to be playing football because, like I said, this team has, bro, this team has the biggest list of players in the top 200 that we've done to date so far, and we've talked about almost 16 teams, I think. We've talked about 16 teams now, and they have the largest list that we've seen. And we've talked about teams like the Bengals, the Ravens, some of these really good football teams. They have Derek Carr being drafted as their QB1 in Superflex. Keep in mind, this is Superflex. And sorry, I'm pulling up this list, so I apologize for my stuttering. 36.6 quarterback Derek Carr. He's being drafted as QB 19. Chris Olave off the board, ADP 40.5. Good for wide receiver 12. Alvin Kamara, ADP of 107.8. Good for running back 29. Michael Thomas, ADP 121.7, good for wide receiver 46. Jamal Williams, ADP 136 or 139.6, good for running back 42. Kendre Miller, ADP 155.4, good for running back 47. Then they have Taysom Hill, ADP 162.4, good for tight end 19. Rashid Shaheed, shout out Weber State, ADP 178.3, good for wide receiver 71. And then Jawan Johnson, ADP of 187.2, good for tight end 22. So long list, but where do your eyes take you first here on this war?
Well, my eyes take me first to Michael Thomas because there's a scenario he could finish out of the top 200, depending on his injuries and all that stuff. I don't know, I just feel like he's a player of a bygone era for New Orleans Saints football that needs to leave. Honestly, like Kamara's getting there too.
I think
As
Kamara
far as like,
is I think Kamara is a smash at that ADP. Running back 29? That is so low.
yeah, he's a smash. But I'm talking about like in general,
Yeah.
like, but man, like imagine and actually have a team with these two players. But unfortunately, is Dynasty and not redraft.
Mm-hmm.
Like, man, imagine getting your wide receivers and your quarterbacks, then circling back around and getting like Kamara and Miles Sanders like as your running backs. That's like an ideal zero running back situation.
Yep. I think I think he's a smash and I actually disagree with you. I understand the fear and the risk of Michael Thomas, but I think, being drafted where he's being drafted at, you're drafting him as a flex receiver for your team. And if healthy, when healthy, even if it's minimal, I mean, last year, 3 games where he was healthy, but he averaged 17 points per game. I think when healthy, he's going to be a value at that ADP. It's just a matter of how much he plays. But you hope he stays healthy. He hasn't done it for 2 seasons. But I think that there's chance of him being a very big value there if you're willing to take the risk. Obviously, I think there's value with the Alvin Kamara as running back 29. That feels like the most no-brainer pick you can make with this team right here, because there's a real chance just with the usage, and we've seen some of it in the preseason that they had today, like Carr was using Kamara in the passing game. They were using Kamara. I know he had a dip in efficiency last year. Even when we just look at Alvin Kamara from a fantasy points per game standpoint last year, just pulling it up right here, finished last year as running back 13 from a fantasy points per game standpoint. Let's say he dips a little bit. Let's say he's running back 18. You're drafting him as running back 29. It's a value there no matter what. And maybe they are a little bit better this year than they were last year because it's an upgrade at the quarterback position. Derek Carr, to me, is an upgrade at the quarterback position. As much hate that Derek Carr gets, he's an upgrade for the New Orleans Saints. And I think he's going to be a very big benefit to Chris Olave. We haven't talked about Chris Olave yet, but Olave is being drafted as wide receiver 12. And I think that's a very safe pick for him. I just, it's tough for me to think of a situation where a majority of the year Chris Olave isn't putting up wide receiver 1 numbers for your roster.
I can agree. Unfortunately, the secret's out on Chris Olave, so you'll be hard pressed to get him on your team because everybody's pretty much expecting him to have a stud year.
Yeah, I mean, and I think he should. And if you're in dynasty leagues and you have Chris Olave, you're very happy about it. If you can get Chris Olave, go do it. And then if you're in your redraft leagues, I think drafting him as wide receiver 12, that is more than fine to me, because let's talk about some of the guys that are going in the same range as him. Just looking at these these wide receivers in that same tier as Chris Olave, it's Devontae Smith, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf. How do you feel about those guys compared to Olave?
Devontae Smith, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, Chris Olave.
That's the tier, right? Like that's the tier he belongs in.
Yeah, that's the tier right there. That's the tier. And he's near the top of that tier. So
I think it's a safe pick. I don't think there's nothing crazy there for Chris Olave.
there's so
I don't
many good wide receivers in the NFL, man.
I don't expect Chris Olave to finish top 5 at the position. I'm not saying that, but low end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2 for your rosters, that's where you're drafting him at. That's probably what he's going to produce for you. But I wanted to one more point that I want to bring up. I guess we have 2 more points on these Saints and then we'll get out of here, but we look at this. They do have Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller with pretty much, back to back on their team as far as the ADPs go. I project Jamal Williams to be the starter. How do you feel about Kendre Miller in 2023? Is he a guy that you think is going to make a difference this year, or is he somebody that's more of a stash and hold for future seasons?
I mean, he's a stash and hold unless there's an injury to either Williams or Kamara. If one of those two get injured, then he'll be relevant this year. Otherwise, I think he's a stash and hold. I think we'll get a good preview of what he can be while Kamara is suspended. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and keep in mind that he did get hurt today in their preseason game.
Yeah,
They
seeing
said
that.
they said that he got his knee checked out. So that's
Yeah,
a little bit worrisome. I don't know enough to tell you whether or not it's the same knee that he hurt in college that he was recovering from, but a knee injury nonetheless is kind of worrisome for your running backs. But I think I agree. He's a stash and hold in 2023 for your dynasty rosters. And in redraft, I don't think I'm drafting Kendre Miller at the draft. He's a guy that you pick up off waivers later.
yeah, yeah.
And then let's talk about the 2 tight ends because they have Taysom Hill and Juwan Johnson, both these guys being drafted here. Do you prefer one over the other? Or is there how do you feel about Hill and Johnson?
I mean, Hill, Johnson, Moreau, like I don't know. I mean, we got to watch it play out. That's a tough tight end room to dissect. To
And
be
Jimmy
honest,
Graham.
and Jimmy, yeah, I mean, if you want to count Jimmy Graham and Jimmy Graham,
Yeah.
I think Jimmy Graham's going to be street clothes, but we'll see.
I don't think he makes the team.
Yeah,
But I think for me, I've been saying in these mock drafts that the ADP of Taysom Hill, it just feels like a stupid pick. I'm sorry. It just, I think the days of Taysom Hill taking quarterback snaps are over. I mean, he is Derek Carr in town now, guys. They want to got their quarterback. I get it if Taysom Hill is
I agree with that too.
I think that's what people are trying to do, right? They want to get cute because they're like, "Oh, I can play Taysom Hill at the tight end position, but maybe he takes some quarterback snaps, maybe he does this." Like I just think those days are over. Yeah, he can do that when you have Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston playing quarterback, but it's Derek Carr, guys. And Derek Carr's not gonna. The best option for the Saints is to have Derek Carr taking snaps at quarterback. That's the best thing they can do. And
It's the
so
best thing they can do.
it feels bad. And then when you look at some of the other tight ends that are being drafted right around him, it's that tier of Sam Laporta, Cole Kmet, Irv Smith. Like, why would you not draft those guys over Taysom Hill? It just feels like a bad pick. And I think Juwan Johnson is the tight end that will be the best receiving tight end on the team.
Yeah, and I think
So
the only person that could bump him is if you just get some type of like revival of Foster Moreau. So
yeah, I mean, still to be seen. He's recovering from the Hodgkin's lymphoma, so he's recovering from that. It's good to see him actually. They were saying that they didn't know if he was going to play football this year, but it looks like he will. So that's good for him.
yeah,
But obviously, there's a long road of recovery still that he needs
yeah,
to
Moreau.
before he's a bona fide starter for this team. But yeah, man, I think that's really it. Any final comments about the Saints before we get out of here?
Nah, man. The
All
NFC
right.
and AFC South are brutal divisions to review. That's for damn
Yeah.
sure.
I think that might be our worst one. That was probably the hardest one that we had to get out of the way, but the other ones should be a lot better moving forward. So, I appreciate every single one of you guys that stuck with us through this whole thing. We enjoy doing it for you guys. And if you want to watch these all in smaller formats so you don't have to watch some of the teams you don't care about, we put those out for you as well. Also, go join our Discord. It is going to be linked in the description of this video and in the YouTube banner. That is going to be where we talk fantasy football. We're in there talking A.T. Perry today. We've been talking A.T. Perry for days at this point, whether we should drop Zach Moss for Trey Palmer or A.T. Perry or whatever. So we're in the weeds over there. If you want to get in the weeds, go join that. And then last but not least, if you enjoyed the content, you want to support the content, the best free way for you guys to do that is to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and then share this with the guys you play fantasy football with. Or if you don't want to share it with them, just leave a comment on this video for us. So, War, final thoughts from you?
Final thought is let's get the hell out of here.
Let's get the hell out of here, man. We will see you guys on the next video coming in about a week. So see you guys then. Peace out.